Hey guys, welcome back to another Whiteboard Friday. Today we want to talk a little bit about return on investment. And we find that a lot of times there's some confusion about what ROI is, how it's used, and how to actually go about calculating. So we want to take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about this. First of all, I want to talk about what is return on investment. So return on investment is very specifically the return that an organization gets on a project from the investment that they put into it. So, what is the input? What is the output? What's the difference? And that's basically what a technical definition of what return on investment is. But really, return on investment, let me tell you what it isn't. What it is not is something that actually is used to show an improvement in leading indicators. So things like traffic or things that are very specific to a particular department that might care about. What you really want to look at here as far as return on investment goes, for the purposes of what we're going to discuss, is going to be things that your executives in your organization are going to care about. So this is going to be reduction in cost. This is going to be increase in revenue. This is going to be, risk mitigation. Those sorts of things are going to be what return on investment will mean. Now, why return on investment? The reasons why you would need to know what return on investment is and use it for your business purposes is because this is going to be how you're going to justify getting capital and operational budget increases for projects that you want to do. It's also going to be how you're going to show your leadership how your department is performing in conjunction with their overall strategies. What is your C-suite trying to accomplish, and how is what you're doing tying into that in a very direct way? And that's a really important way for you to be able to show why you need additional headcount, why you need to run particular projects, the value that you're bringing as a group, the value that you're bringing personally. So this has a lot of implications, both internally for your department, but also for your own career progression. And so uses for return on investment, I named a couple of those there in the sense that you're going to want to use this to be able to show executives what you're doing and how it's improving revenues or reducing costs, so that you can either implement a specific project that you're aiming at, or you can show them the value of what you're doing. So you can say, hey, I need additional headcount. Here's the value we're bringing. Here's what we could bring if we have the additional headcount, the additional resources that we would have to execute on the projects that we're working on, those sorts of things. It would also be really important to be able to show that you understand how to tie a particular set of tactics into the overall strategy for an organization. So this is very important for people like marketing teams, getting a seat at the table with the C-suite as they plan out and think through the strategy for the organization. So those are some of the reasons behind return on investment, but let's talk a little bit about how you actually get there. So first of all, with metrics, there's two different things that you're going to have to look at. There's leading indicators and there's lagging indicators. So a leading indicator for marketing teams, for example, is going to be something like website traffic or even conversions, like a conversion to an appointment request form and those sorts of things. So these are leading indicators, which are steps in a process that someone necessarily takes in the journey to the actual return. Okay, so in this case, let's talk about it from a website perspective. The actual return is going to be someone coming into the hospital, getting services performed, and having revenue flow to the organization. So that revenue is the return. The leading indicators are the things that happen prior to that you can measure, that are an indication of what's coming down the line. Now, then you also have lagging indicators, and lagging indicators are going to be things like actual admissions records and the revenue flowing and those sorts of metrics that will show you after the return event has occurred, these are the outcomes of that. And so that's sort of what is traditionally called the lagging indicators. So the metrics that you'll need for a lot of cases, again, we'll just use the example of a website, and you can tailor this to various environments. But leading indicators, you're going to need to know things like traffic and estimated traffic increase, or possibly seeing if you're showing a return on investment of a project that you have implemented, you'll want to be able to show what the traffic was before, what the traffic was after. You're going to want to be able to show conversion rates before, conversion rates after. You're going to want to be able to know those kinds of metrics. You're also going to want to be able to know other things like your market share. We'll talk about that in a moment when we get down here. But also you're going to want to be able to know things like what is a reasonable assumption of what the conversion rate actually means to the hospital. And again, I'll explain that in a moment. But you're also going to want to know some of the lagging indicators. So what is your what is the average patient revenue? And what is that going to actually look like? So depending on how your organization measures this, it could be anywhere from a few $100s to a few $1,000s per patient. And you just need to know how your organization measures that. And in fact, it might even be per service line that they break that out. And that's a very important component to know based on what kind of initiative that you're putting together. So you're going to want to know those metrics. The other thing is, and this is we'll get into some of the things I was mentioning a minute ago, is your ROI metric as CFO friendly? And so one of the things that I've seen so many times that I just have to shake my head is that when I see organizations put together these spreadsheets and they show every visitor on our website is worth $6.50, and they have these metrics in there, and they show what the organization does this much revenue, we have this much web traffic, and they're dividing and showing it out. No CFO in the world is going to actually buy that. They're going to look at that and laugh you out of the room. The bottom line is that that's not an accurate way of measuring return on investment, because there's far too many assumptions of the value of the project that's being created. This is something that CFO would never bring to the board, and this is something that an investment team would never use as a return on investment. And so the executives in your organization are just not going to buy it. And so it's just not going to have the credibility that you want it to have. So what you want to do is show that you're using accurate assumptions and that you're taking into consideration things to downgrade the return on investment that you're putting together. So for example, market share. You actually might want to take a look at it and say, okay, we have 29% market share, and so if we had 100 conversions come through our website, we're going to assume that 29 of those would have come to the organization whether the website existed or not, or whether this program existed or not, because we have a 29% market share of the consumer's minds. And so you want to downshift your ROI estimates based on that. You also want to downshift on some other metrics. So for example, what percentage of conversions, in this case, accounts for actual revenue to the organization, to the hospital. So for example, if you have 100 conversions, well, those 100 conversions might be appointment request to a physician's office. Well, that physician's office may not be owned. It may not actually produce any revenue for that particular appointment for the hospital. So the question you've got to ask is, how many of those 100 appointment requests ever actually end up in the hospital? And so, you can take a look at this, you can dig into some analytics, or you can make a very conservative estimate. A lot of times, what I'll work through with clients is something like saying, hey, what if only 20% or maybe 10% of all of the appointment requests that come through the website ever actually show up into the hospital? And so what you would do is you'd say, okay, if I have 100 conversions, I'm only going to count 10 or 20 of those for actual revenue for ROI purposes. So these are some of the things that you're going to want to make sure that you do, so that when you show and explain your assumptions to your CFO, they look at you and they go, wow, this person understands how to actually produce an ROI, how to be conservative, and they're not just giving me pie in the sky that really doesn't have any credibility. Now, the other thing is your presentation. Now, this is something that marketing teams and any folks who do any presentations at all really should understand. You can take a spreadsheet, and even if you're showing it to someone who is a CFO, you're showing it to somebody who's a CEO, COO, and they really understand spreadsheets, they understand data. If you're showing them a spreadsheet, you're going to get yourself into an environment where there's a lot of nitpicking and questioning, and you're going to get into more detail. If you're trying to simply say, my organization is, or my department is producing this amount of return, or this is the value we're bringing to the organization, this is why I need more headcount, this is why this project makes sense. You need to know two things. You need to know, one, who is your audience, and what are the metrics that they actually care about. You don't want to show your CEO how you're going to increase web traffic. They don't care about that all that much, to be honest. What they care about is, again, reducing risk, reducing cost, increasing revenue. Increasing market share would be another one of those. What you want to do is make sure that you are giving them the insights that they care about, and that you're sharing with them in a presentation format that makes sense. So for example, if you're trying to get a project approved and you say that this project is going to cost $100,000, what you're going to want to be able to do is say, hey, do we think, based on all of these assumptions, how we've measured this out, the best practices, the results other organizations have seen, you're putting together the business case for it, then you might be saying, well, the ROI is 1,300% or 1,400% or 500% or whatever it may be. Instead of putting it in those terms, put it in something more tangible and say, do we believe that by putting this in place, we can attract 5 new patients per month over the course of the next 12 months? Because then that puts a very measurable, very tangible metric on it that they can get hold of and say, oh yeah, I can see how this project, or I can see how adding this new headcount is going to bring in 5 new patients per month, and that is easier for them to get hold of. And so that even though you're speaking to someone who understands spreadsheets and they understand data, you still need to make this incredibly understandable and insightful and something that they can get hold of and take away. So that is the thing. Know your audience, know the goal of your audience and what you're trying and what your metrics are trying to get to, and present that in a way that makes sense. So hopefully this helps. Always happy to help any of you. Please feel free to reach out to me. We've run through a lot of these ROI cases with other clients. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.